Here to explain how you can achieve 100% fixed coverage before the next meltdown is Brett Coker, President of Coker Automotive Consultants. Please give him a warm welcome.
All right, well, welcome. My name is Brett Coker, President of Coker Automotive Consultants in Pensacola, Florida. What we're going to be talking today is about fixed coverage. You've heard the saying, those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. We all remember the Great Recession, right? 2007, 2008. And vehicle sales in the United States dropped from, 16 to 9 million pretty much overnight. And that's just one recession. I mean, we've had, as we talked about, this is the variable operation we're talking about. And I've been in the business about 40 years. I've seen it come up. I've seen it go down. One in the 90s, one in the 80s was particularly bad. In fact, I know of a second-generation car dealer who had been in the business 30-some years. This was a Harvard Business School graduate. This was a Time Magazine quality dealer, a Pontiac Master Dealer, National Dealer Council, won all the awards in the late 80s. He got taken down with one of the recessions because he believed in variable operation but not in fixed operations. That dealer was Joe Coker, my father, so I have a particular interest in fixed operations, and I've been focusing on fixed operations for the last 20-some years. GM and Chrysler during that last recession almost ceased to exist if it weren't for the government. And the U.S. dealer count went from 22,000 to 18,000. So if you think about it, almost 1 in 5 dealers in the United States went out of business. That's pretty scary. Now, when's the next downturn coming? I don't know if it's next year, 2 years, 5 years, who knows? The only thing I do know, it is coming. We know it's going to come. Again, it's variable operation. It goes up, it goes down. As opposed to fixed operations, which is fairly steady. So dealers that have strong fixed operations tend to be the survivors. And that's really the subject we're talking about today is fixed coverage. A higher fixed coverage, meaning how much profit we can produce out of the service, parts, and body shop, which are fixed activities, that means we have a lower break-even. We'll get into the particulars of the calculations. So how do we actually define fixed coverage? The definition is the fixed coverage ratio is the extent to which the gross profit from fixed operations, again, service, parts, if you have a body operation, can cover a dealership's total operating expenses less variable selling expenses. So let's just get into it and show you how it might work. So let's take a dealership that might have, let's say, $5 million operating expense. And if you're at this point in time in the year where you've got the year-end statements, this is a great time to take a look at it. Go to page 1, for example, on your GM financial statement and look at all total operating expenses at the bottom of the page. And that's every operation, new, pre-owned, F&I, service, parts, body, lease and rental, whatever. Take your total operating expenses, including semi-fixed, fixed, personal expenses, everything. And let's say that came up to $5 million as in this example. And then we want to deduct our variable selling expenses. Variable selling expenses are the expenses that are accrued based on the sale of a vehicle. So commissions, floor plan expense, advertising. Subtract those expenses out, and what we're going to come up with is, in this example, a $3.8 million net operating expense. That's our break even. Now what we're going to do is find out what is our fixed gross profit. In this example, $2 million. So now you're going to flip to page 2 in your financial statement. You're going to go to the top of a page. You're going to take your service gross profit for the year. You're going to take your parts gross profit for the year. Body shop if you got it. Add those gross profits together. In this example, it came up to $2 million. Now we know if we take our $2 million in fixed gross profit divided by the 3.8 operating expense, we have a 52.6 fixed coverage ratio, or also known as fixed absorption. How much of the expenses can be absorbed by the gross profit produced by fixed operations, which also means that we've got 47.4% unabsorbed expenses. That 47.4% has got to be absorbed by the sale of new and used and F&I products before we even make $1 of net profit. So let's go to the next step. Let's talk about break even. What is break even and how is it calculated? So remember in our example, we've got, $3.8 million in net operating expense. Fixed operations is assuming or producing $2 million in gross. So now we got 1.8 unabsorbed. That's got to be absorbed by the variable operations. And let's assume that we're netting out $1,200 per new and pre-owned. And that includes minus the variable selling expenses. Your variable selling expenses includes your F&I income, so front and back income. So if we net out 1,200, that means our break-even on an annual basis is 1,500 units. Divide that by 12. So now we're talking about every month we got to sell 125 units before we start making money. That's our break-even, or making a nut, okay? So what we're going to do is talking about how do we reduce the break-even by increasing our fixed coverage. All right. And we need to understand that we're talking about fixed coverage. It's just not fixed operations that's involved in this equation. One is operating expense control. All the expenses in the dealership we're talking about. So, if you're a service director, service manager, you're responsible for producing fixed gross profit, and you're responsible for some of your operating expenses, but you have no control over rent factor. You have no control over expenses in new and pre-owned. They've got to also control their expenses. Your focus is going to be your departmental expenses and maximizing gross profit. Second aspect is we've got to increase our variable net per vehicle retailed. We'll talk about that. And thirdly is obviously the main focus of this workshop is how do we maximize fixed ops gross profit. So let's just talk about a little bit about controlling expenses. Understand this, that every expense dollar saved is a net profit dollar. It has the same value as a net profit dollar. So if we were to, for example, let's say we had a $100 sale in the service department. How much of that $100 floats down into net profit? 8%, 9%, 10%, something like that. Let's just say 10%. So we sell $100, we net 10%, $10. What if we had a $100 expense savings? How much of that is net profit? 100%. So a net profit dollar is 10 times more valuable than the sales dollar. Got to have the sales dollar. Without sales, there's no gross. Without gross, there's no net. But we understand that controlling expenses is incredibly important to our fixed coverage. The time to tighten your belt, and there's a typo actually on this. It says the time to tighten is today. The time to tighten your expenses is yesterday. We're all having a pretty good run, 17 million in sales. We're all fat, dumb, and happy, and we're not watching our expenses as close as we should. We need to look at every check. We need to look at every contract. We need to negotiate everything. We need to make sure we're wringing out the necessary dollars so that we can make sure that we're maximizing our fixed coverage penetration. But don't cut the wrong expenses. You don't want to cut your training expenses. You don't want to cut your customer retention expenses. You don't want to cut your expenses that are producing revenue. Again, that's the lifeblood of our business. But again, look at every other expense and see what you can do to control any of those expenses. Just to touch on this, our second leg of the stool is maximizing variable net per vehicle retail. It only impacts your break-even, not fixed coverage. If we have a higher net per vehicle retail, if we can maximize more gross on the sale of the vehicle, maximize more F&I products, that means our break-even point goes down. And so that's obviously a good thing. Now, service managers, we're always involved in every aspect of the dealership, and we're actually involved in this aspect too. And you ask, well, how can we impact variable operations? If we have limited throughput in our service operation, that bottleneck, if we can't produce enough flat rate hours, and that's what throughput is, that's the product we sell is flat rate hours. If we're limited on that, that means we are limited in being able to do PDIs as quickly, install accessories as quickly, get the internal and recon units turned around as quickly as possible. So we impact the sales activity. If I'm a salesperson and I want to get a vehicle over the curb so I can collect my commission, but I have an opportunity to sell some accessories, but I know it might take a day or two to get through the service department, I may be inclined to pass on that and just go ahead and sell the vehicle without the accessory. So we impact what they do at the front end based on how much throughput we can get through the shop. All right? So, and that leads us to our third step of the third leg of the stool is how do we maximize throughput? Again, throughput is the flat rate hours that we can get through the shop on a daily basis. And understand this, flat rate hours that we have today, the availability of flat rate hours today is a evaporating inventory. If we, for example, if we have parts that we don't sell today, tomorrow they're still in inventory. If we don't sell flat rate hours that we have available today, you'll never sell them tomorrow. It never carries over. So we need to maximize the available hours we have available and sell every hour that we have available. Okay? So let's talk about the three things that maximize throughput. Retention, recruitment, proficiency. If you could hire a technician today, what would that technician be worth to you in gross profit? Last year we did a workshop and we came up with the number of $250,000 in gross profit. That's service and parts gross profit. That's what a good tech, not a great tech. A great tech can make $300,000 and even more in gross profit per year. The problem is you don't have techs coming to your door saying, hey, I'm ready to come to work. I got a toolbox out in my truck. It just doesn't happen anymore. Because we're selling so many cars, because we have so much repair business, and there's so few techs entering into the market, now we're on the short end of the stick on the supply and demand curve. So we've got to find a way to increase throughput, but there's just the techs just aren't out there. We've got to fight the battle to try to recruit them, but we've got to find some other ways to increase throughput with the limited techs that we have. So let's talk about retention of technicians. Everybody's trying to poach your technicians. If you've got an A tech that you're paying $25 an hour and he's a really good tech, you better be careful. He's going to be very poachable. Everybody's looking for that tech. They're advertising for him. You're going to see people come into your shop with business cards. You're going to see vendors wanting to talk to them. Everybody's looking for your techs. We've got to find a way to put some handcuffs on these guys so that they stay with us for years and years and years. So if we recognize the value of a technician, again, at $250,000 and more, then we should recognize the value to us and we should show some respect to them. I'd like to see the general manager and the dealer come out periodically and talk to the technicians. How's your wife? How's your family? They have a good month. Why don't we send their wife a gift certificate to have a massage or a pedicure or a dinner? Show some appreciation. We've got salespeople up front. We show appreciation. They get plaques. They get parking spaces. They get appreciation. Our techs are making us a lot of money. And speaking of a lot of money, I've heard some dealers say, well, you know, I got technicians getting ready to make $100,000. That's just too much money. No, we want our technicians making as much money as they can, because if you're grossing 75% on labor, if they're making $100,000, you're making $300,000. And that's just a labor gross. Add your parts gross on top of that. So the more they make, the more we make. So we want them to make as much money as possible. And the more money they make, the more the handcuffs go on, the less poachable they are. So we want to make sure that we find, I want to talk to them. Tell me what I can do to help you be more proficient in your work. Tell me what I can do to help you turn more hours. Because when you turn out more hours, I make more money. Communication. We need to have shop meetings, periodically talking to the technicians, getting their input. And we need to take them out to lunch to make sure that they're happy. If they've got any issues, we can deal with those issues. The last time I want some communication, I don't want communication, is when they're rolling their toolbox out into the truck. Recruitment. We've got to play in this battle, and this is getting less and less productive, but we've got to do it. I would rather us not try to recruit franchise technicians. It's a cutthroat operation. We're just raising the rates, but the rates are getting higher out there. I'm seeing rates up in $50 per hour flat rate that we're paying technicians in the Northwest. But if we're going after each other's technicians, we're just exacerbating the situation. We're going to talk a little bit here in a few minutes about independence. We should be getting into the independent repair business more and more. Well, we've got limited throughput. This is where we can find some technicians. They're out there. Now, they're not going to want to work weekends, and they're not going to want to do warranty work, because that's what they're doing now. They don't have to do warranty. They don't have to do work on weekends. They're doing heavy repair, and the heavy repair, engines, transmissions, suspensions, a lot of those components, 70% of that business is going to the independents. We're missing that business, and they're getting good grosses on it. They're grossing 70-75% on labor, and they're grossing more on their parts than you are. They're grossing 45-50% on parts. It's a business we need to get into. It's a fertile market. We'll talk some more about that. And then recruit from the mass merchandisers. That's the Pet Boards, the Meinekes, the Quickie Lubes, all those out there. That's our entry-level people. Those are our apprentices to bring into your quick service operations. They already have some skill sets. That's who we're looking for there. In the way of advertising for technicians, again, it's becoming, we're getting less and less results out of this. Craigslist works fairly well in a lot of markets. Indeed.com has been very productive. It's a proactive website where you can actually go out and touch people who have apps on site. Hey, we'd like to talk with you, as opposed to being just reactive. And then ask your existing techs. They've got tech communities. They talk. They've got websites. We're looking for techs. We'll pay you a signing bonus. Get the word out. Okay? All right. In the way of recruitment, I'd love to say, I'll give you a silver bullet. In fact, here in a little bit I will show you how to bring on 2 techs immediately, effectively, the 2 techs. You're going to have to grow your own. Growing your own techs takes time. It takes time and it takes investment. You can put teams together. Teams is a pretty complicated process. We don't have time to go into it now. But you can have an A tech, a B tech, a C tech, up to C techs, 6 techs on a team. They work together. They get paid on proficiency of the team. You've got a diagnostician who also dispatches. So there's training going on. They're working together. It's almost like a little pit crew. You can have 6 guys and 4 stalls, so you have more, can get more work out of less stalls. Very advanced system. It increases your proficiency and actually lowers your cost of sale. And then apprentices. We bring apprentices in through your internal service operation, your quick lubes, and then we can move them into internal and recon operations so they get a little feel for hanging parts and minor repairs. And then we can bring them in and they can either go to repair activity, or they can become technicians and become warranty techs. And understand that we have a real problem facing us in our service departments because our cars are getting more and more complex, and we're not going to be having mechanics. We're going to be needing technicians, engineers that are going to be working with laptops. And where are these people coming from? We're not getting techs into our business. Tech schools and high schools are pretty much gone. And the perceptions that we're grease monkeys in our service departments, they don't understand that you can come out of tech school and be making $50,000 and making 6 digits pretty quickly. There's the future. We've got to start working on it now because this is going to take you 2 to 3 years, and you're competing with a lot of other dealerships for that technical prowess. And then mentoring. Typically, it's what we do. We'll bring an apprentice and we'll pair them up with a lead tech. Just be real careful about this. I'm going to try to give you some numbers without a flip chart, but think about this. We bring an apprentice in and we pay him clock hour typically. $15 an hour, let's just say. So he's working 8 hours a day. We're paying him $120. And we tell the lead tech every flat rate hour that he produces, we'll pay you your regular rate. Let's just say it's $25 an hour. Okay? So the apprentice techs, let's say it produces 4 hours in a day. We paid him $120. So what's that cost you per flat rate hour? $30. Oh, plus we got to pay the lead tech his $25. So that apprentice is costing you $55 an hour. So avoid that trap. If you bring him in on a mentoring process, he needs to be a diminishing override to the lead tech. You say, Mr. Lead Tech, for the first 30 days, we're going to pay you $15. The next 30 days is 12, 10, 8, and after 4 months or so, he needs to be off on flat rate, running on his own as an apprentice. And any of our techs, our apprentice techs, there are exceptions to the rule, but all of our techs should be paid on some sort of incentive base. Flat rate is the best plan out there. I've seen a lot of hybrids. Flat rate is still the best plan. But if you get an apprentice in there, you've got to get him on flat rate as quickly as possible so that you can lower your cost of sale. Okay? All right. Let's talk about proficiency. We hear the words productivity, and that's a misnomer. Proficiency is made up of 2 words, productivity and efficiency. Proficiency. Productivity is if a technician is available for 8 hours, 8 clock hours at the dealership, how many hours is he actually in the stall turning wrenches? Typically, the number is 5. 5 out of 8. So he's roughly 60-some% productive. And, I get a lot of surprised look, especially from dealers. You mean he's only 60% productive? Typically, that's correct. Well, what's he doing for the other 3 hours? He's chasing a service advisor around to try to get approvals. He's going to the parts department, waiting for parts. He's looking for special tools. He's looking for shop supplies. He's trying to find a service manager. He's back to the service advisor. He's having a cigarette. He's going to the bathroom. He's outside. He's on the phone. There's 100 things we're doing that's taking him away from productivity. And so if you think about this, I told you I was going to give you a silver bullet of how to hire 2 techs immediately. And you service managers, you know what I'm talking about. Every time I come into your dealership, first thing I'm going to look at 7:30 is what's happening. Your technicians get there at 7:30, and nothing happens until 8 o'clock. There's no wrenches being turned. There's no air wrenches going off because the service advisors have to write up the customers. They have to dispatch the work. We've got to find out if we've got the parts in stock. We've got to acquire the parts. And then we start turning wrenches about 8 o'clock. So that first half hour of the day is gone. And then at 4:30, we're supposed to be open until 5. At 4:30, they're putting their tools away, and it's silence for that last half hour. We're losing a half hour in the morning, half hour in the afternoon. That's an hour per technician. And why is that? Because we're afraid of carryovers. Our service advisors are afraid of carryovers. So we create these 2 tsunamis every day in the dealership. Have all the customers coming in the morning, and so we rush to write them up. We don't have time to build value. We don't have time to sell services. We dispatch quickly. Parts department's rapidly trying to get the parts, and we slowly ramp up our process. And then in the afternoon, we have our delivery process tsunami. We don't have time to spend time with the customers and explain our complicated repair orders, set the next appointment, ask for Google reviews. It's just churn them through. From a production point of view, we want to write up at 9, 9:30, 10, 10:30, 11 all day and deliver all day. It means we're going to have more alternate transportation, loaner cars, rental cars, but the cost of those expenses are substantially less than increasing our proficiency in the shop. Because here's what's happening, and I know you service managers, your heads are going up and down. We don't have enough throughput. You don't have enough technicians. So you got to do warranty. You got to do PDIs. You got to do internal and recon. And so what suffers? What goes away? Customer pay. Customer pay. And customer pay is what we want. Customer pay is a business we want to keep and attract. Customer pay is the most proficient for our technicians. Customer pay is where we have the parts on the shelf. The fill rate is very high. Where warranty, the chance of having the parts on the shelf goes down. So the technician is slow in his productivity. But again, because of the limited throughput, customer pay gets set to the side. That's what happens to us historically whenever we have issues with proficiency. Customer pay goes away. And we've got to find a way to maximize our customer pay. Technicians make more money. Everybody makes more money with more customer pay. So that's productivity. Efficiency, on the other hand, so we determine that he's in the stall for 5 hours a day on average. Well, in that 5 hours, how many flat rate hours can he produce? Typically 8 to 10. They're pretty efficient. When they're in their stall, when they got the parts, when they're working. Efficiency is a byproduct of how knowledgeable they are, how dedicated they are, how hungry they are, how hardworking they are, how physically adept they are. We've got to make sure we give them all the training that we can so that they maximize their efficiency. So 2 different aspects. In the way of increasing productivity, I'm just going to throw some things at you. This is an all-day subject. We've got 45 minutes. But one thing I want you to consider is, let's take an example. If you were a brain surgeon working in a hospital, what does that brain surgeon do? We've got a patient. Somebody's got to prep the patient. Somebody's got to clean the utensils. Somebody's got to lay out the utensils. Somebody's got to bring the patient in. Somebody's got to operate on a patient. Somebody's got to clean up the tools and the equipment and the surgical tools. Somebody's got to clean up all the bandages. In a hospital, the brain surgeon only comes in and operates on the patient. He doesn't prep. He doesn't clean up. In our dealerships, our brain surgeons do everything. So we got guys that are producing $125 an hour in parts and labor gross profit, and we've got them doing $10 an hour jobs. So if we were to bring in a shop assistant, and let's say we pay this person $15 an hour, 8 hours a day, it's cost you $120. $120 to hire this person, put them in as a shop assistant. If he can get you 5 more productive hours by taking out trash, by sweeping the floors, by moving cars around, by doing things, delivering parts from the parts department, doing the $10, $12 an hour stuff that we've got our brain surgeons doing now, and it gains us 5 hours at $125. What's that? 5 times 125, 600 some dollars. I would gladly pay 8 to 120 to produce 600. Pay 120 for shop, get $600 more profit, plus 5 hours more throughput that we can do more warranty, more customer pay, more accessory installs, and so on. Okay? Any technology that we can give our technicians, where they can speak into a tablet, where they can cause complaint correction into a tablet, where they can send pictures directly to the visor, where they can communicate directly to the visor, and the visor can communicate that by billing value and sending that in a text to our customers. Any use of technology to increase our proficiency in our shop, you've got to take a look at that. Logistics, special tools, shop supplies. You know, one thing about shop supplies, and I see this a lot, I'll go into a dealership and the shop supplies are in the parts department. So a technician needs a 10-cent screw, nut, bolt, tie connector, whatever. He goes to the parts department, parts guy's got to go back and find the nut and bolt and bill it out, and that's costing us $125 an hour for a 10-cent part. Put the shop supplies out in the shop. In fact, I want the technician, when he wants a bolt, grab a handful of those and put them in your toolbox. Next time you need one, you walk the 3 feet to your toolbox, get that nut, bolt, tie, connector, and go back to work. Okay, because it's $125 an hour. Anything we can do to keep them in the stall, and they don't have any problem with it because they make more money. And when they start making more money and they get used to making that money, mama likes the money. That's the new normal. We all make more money, and we satisfy the customers. Communications. I don't want to ever see technicians walking from the shop into the sales activity, standing behind a service advisor to get approval. It's uncomfortable for the customer, and it's costing us money. Cell phones, text messages, walkie-talkies, find a way to keep your technicians in their stalls making money. All right, in the way of increasing efficiency, training, we talked about that. Got to keep training. Our products keep getting more complicated. Train. It's an investment. Pay plans, they got to be incentive-based. Again, flat rate. There is no perfect pay plan, but flat rate's the best one I've run into, and I've been in this 40 years. We talked about teams. Anything we can do to increase proficiency. Always, if service managers, if you're laying awake at night thinking of things, it's proficiency. That's throughput. That impacts throughput. And if you have a shop foreman, I'd change the name. He's a production manager. His job is to maximize throughput. That's also quality control, because if you have a comeback, what's your proficiency on a comeback? 0. So you got to have a quality product because it impacts your proficiency and obviously impacts customer retention. Let's talk about parts department. Parts department is a support activity. I highly recommend that parts department on an org chart be underneath service, that the parts manager responds to the service manager. Now, sure, they have some parts counter sales, they have some wholesale sales, but 90% and up of their sales are parts sold on repair orders. They are a support activity for the service department. Their mindset needs to be throughput, because the more labor hours we put through the shop, what goes along with that? Parts sales. A parts manager, I want your focus on, I know you focus on turns, and that's important. We don't want obsolescence. But I want your mindset and your focus to be on fill rate. When that technician, either electronically or walks up and say, I need a widget, you have that widget in stock, you put it in his hands, and he goes, or she goes back and goes to work. If you don't have it, he's got to go back, or she goes back, she stops, they've got to wrap it up, bring it out of the vehicle, and the productivity tanks on us. So fill rate. Deliver the parts to the technician. I don't want a $125 an hour guy walking to get the parts. I want a $10 or $12 an hour person walking the parts to the technician. Shop supplies, we've talked about that. Get that as close to we can to the activity where it's going to be used. Same thing with fast-moving parts. A lot I see now, we're finally moving wiper blades and air filters and oil filters out to where that activity occurs. As much as we can, get the parts out there. We can inventory it. We maybe have a little bit of shrinkage. We can control that. But the improvements in proficiency will substantially overcome any additional costs for that. All right, let's talk about fair warranty and reimbursement. Again, our job is to maximize gross profit. Check with your state. There's 30-some states that mandate that the manufacturer pay dealers retail parts markup, meaning that you'll do an RO analysis. You can kick out your competitive jobs like oil changes and filters and focus on repair parts, and whatever your markup is on that is what the manufacturer is required by the state to pay you. Now, some of the manufacturers, GM for example, is trying to overcome that by packaging that if you let us pay you a certain amount of standard markup on parts, we'll give you a cost of living adjustment on your labor, and it's kind of a way to, hey, don't go after us by what the state mandates. Just make sure you're getting a fair markup. You know, I go in and I see we're getting 18% markup on parts. That's not a fair markup. That's not a fair markup at all. What's that give you, 12% gross? We should be getting 40% gross on these parts just like we are with retail customers. Same thing with labor rates. Make sure you're getting every dollar you can from the manufacturer. At some point, some manufacturer, and I keep talking about this every year, is going to wake up and say, we need to increase the hours we pay on our jobs. We need to stop paying flat warranty times based on laboratory perfect conditions. We need to bump it up. We want our technicians to make money because the word's going to get out, and technicians are going to want to flow to that franchise, to that manufacturer, and the other manufacturers are then going to be playing catch up. Let me just touch on one other thing about shop supplies. You should make money on shop supplies if your state allows it. Some states do not. California, for example. You can charge for recovery of hazardous waste, but you can't charge for shop supplies. But if you can charge, and you should have a credit amount on your financial statement, roughly a 2-to-1 ratio. If you're spending $3,000 a month in shop supplies, you should be collecting about $6,000 in shop supplies income. And either the production manager, shop foreman, or the service manager every month needs to look at the shop tickets that are coming out of the parts department. Because what you're going to find if you're not looking at it now is, keep in mind that parts managers don't want to ever have write-offs. They're getting ready to have inventories. What they do is a perpetual inventory. If they do a bin count and there's supposed to be 4 and there's only 3, what are they going to do with that one part? They're going to charge you on a shop ticket to use, service department. That doesn't mean that you used it. You may have, and they forgot to bill it out. Could be shrinkage. You can't afford to be buying those parts. We've got to make sure that we're proper accounting. So look at your shop tickets. If you have a big shop supply expense problem in your shop, instead of having one ticket, have each technician have a shop ticket, and then compare those shop tickets to see why is this guy at 300, 300, 400, 500, and this guy's at 1,000. You do that a couple months, that'll put a stop to that. Okay? All right. Get into customer pay repair business. Get into customer pay repair business. The key word here is repair. The independent shops are doing 70% of this business right now. They got 70%. I rarely anymore will go into a franchise dealership and see engines and transmissions and heavy repairs and components being done. Why? It's price. It's price. The independents who used to work for us in the dealerships went out and started their own shop and say, instead of charging $125 an hour, I'll just charge $100. That's just an example. And they get the word out to the customers. The customer words gets out. Google, here, that's the new word of mouth. And they get the business. We can do the same thing. But we get so arrogant in our pricing that we say, well, we're going to charge $125 because that's what we charge in warranty, and we're not going any less. We're going to charge 3.5 hours in this job because that's what the time source says. But what does the market say? What does the market say that job is worth? That's how we should price it, from the outside in, not from the inside out. We can find these techs. and just put a little independent repair shop in your facility, you should have four businesses in your service department. We're all getting in the quickie lube business, and we should be able to compete just like they do. Same pricing, same type of people, and that's a career entry path. And then we've got our internal recon activity. That's a different activity. And then we've got a repair facility, just like we talked about, customer pay. It's not going to be open on weekends. It's not going to have warranty. We compete on that same level that they do. And then we got the warranty business. That's going to be our rocket scientists, our brain surgeons. These are going to be our technical guys. We're going to have to pay them well because the supply and demand dictates, and the level of our technical prowess is getting greater and greater in our vehicles. Train your service salespeople. These are the frontline troops. Mediocrity is unacceptable. You know, I go in and so say, tell me, service advisor, what's your background? Well, I was in sales and I didn't cut it there, so they say, let's put you out here in service. I think it should be the other way around. The most important person in the dealership after the dealer is the service advisor. They interact with 15, 18 customers every day. You know, there's a study done by Toyota that said that customers who rarely use service departments, resale rates are about in the 20% range. Customers who consistently use our service department, resale rates are in the 80s. That number alone should be reason enough that we focus a lot of time, resource, personnel in the service activity. So these people need to be trained. They need to be given focus. They need to be given attention. They need to understand that they're under a lot of stress. They work a lot of hours. They're working in the 50s to 60-hour range. And a lot of stress from customers, from technicians, from management, from sales, from the manufacturers. We've got to make sure they get enough time off that they can refresh. They get worn down. If they're the pointy end of the spear and they're getting worn down every day by customers, you got to find a way to retrain them and refresh them and rehone them all the time. One area that we really have a weakness in our industry is our phone skills. More and more customers are phone shopping us. They're going online, they're Googling, they're finding us, they're going on our website, and they're picking up the phone and calling us. And we do a horrible job. I phone shop all the time. And typically they'll say, well, hey, I was just checking. Could you tell me how much front brakes would be for my Ford Escort? And what do? We shoot them a price. We shoot them a price, and hey, give me a call if you'd like to get it done. So we don't build value. We just shoot them a price. And the next thing the customer's going to do is going to go down the internet, Google a listing. They're going to call the next vendor, and I guarantee you they're going to find a lower price in the marketplace. So therefore, in the absence of any other information, it defaults to price. We're high price. We lose the business. We build negative perceptions. We get a price shopper, and our objective is not to quote prices. Our objective is to get the customer in. So we'll say, hey, I'm sure, tell me a little bit about it. Are you hearing some noises? Are you feeling pulsation? Has this been going on for a while? I'll tell you what we can do. I've got some time this afternoon, about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, which works best for you. I can do a free brake inspection. I can give you tell you exactly what your options are. Again, which one works for you. Set the appointment, gets the customer in. Avoid quoting prices. If you have to quote prices, you have to build value. We have original equipment parts. We've got master trained certified technicians. We wash your car. You got a 2-year, 24,000-mile warranty. Whatever it is, build value, build value. All right, and then service managers. You're not service managers anymore. You are service sales managers, just like a new or a pre-owned manager. Your job is to maximize sales. Hours per repair order, effective labor rates. You got to control your key performance indicators. And understand this, when I talk about sales, we never, ever, ever will sell anything to a customer that they don't need. Every customer's grandmother. You never sell anything to grandmother that she doesn't need. However, we have an obligation to make sure that grandmother's car is safe, reliable, dependable, not going to break down coming home from bingo, not going to have a broken tail light, not going to have a battery that's going to go down on her. That's our obligation, to sell her everything she needs. That's the mindset we have with every single customer. So sales manager, think about what does the new and pre-owned managers do? You have sales meetings, you train, you're on the sales floor with them. In the mornings, you're not behind your door at your desk doing paperwork. You're on the drive, communicating with your advisors, helping them sell, communicating with customers. That's your job. MPIs, not an option. Multi-point inspection, not an option. You know, one of the reasons we have quick lube, quick service, is to build positive perceptions of convenience, quality, service, and price. But it's also an opportunity for us to inspect a vehicle. Again, not an option. By not inspecting a vehicle, it does a disservice for the technician, to the advisors, to the shop, and most importantly, to the customer. We're either leaving money on the table or we're letting customers drive out with a car that's unsafe or unreliable. We cannot do that condition of employment. Okay? All right. Again, talked about shop supplies. It's pretty prevalent in our industry. Make sure you're okay in your state to do it. Everybody's pretty much doing it, so customers have pretty much accepted it. But if you do it, you got to be 100% consistent. You can't charge to some customers and not. As a class of customers, it's 100% or not at all. So if a customer has a problem with it and you feel like you've got to do something about it, you discount labor. You do not take out shop supplies. It stays on a repair order 100% of the time. Okay? Mandatory. I am a big believer in 20 groups, and most of your service managers, most of your dealers are in 20 groups. Maybe you're in 20 groups, and they're a great bang for the buck. I have 3 groups of my own. I've been on the other side as a member. Great training process, but there are some problems that we need to be aware of. We all look at the composite, and we all want to be on the left side. We don't want to have the monkey in our back. We don't want to have to sit in a hot seat. And every page has a ranking line. A lot of it's based on percentages. Gross profit percentage on labor, parts gross profit percentage. We want to be on the left side, so we chase the percentage. That's dangerous. I have clients that are doing 48% gross profit in parts, and some that are 42%, and the guy that's doing 42% is doing a better job. You don't take percentages to the bank, you take dollars to the bank. So I'm not going to get too hung up if you're not at group average, if you're a little bit less, because maybe I'm selling more parts, and maybe I just brought in a new line, and I'm making less profit on these percentage-wise, but I'm putting more dollars in the bank. It's all about dollars in the bank. Fixed coverage is about dollars. It's not about percentages. So we just got to be careful. It's a balance. It's real easy to come back. I can be left side of the page on every single page. I got to just crank my prices up, my matrix up. That's easy. But that's going to impact my gross profit dollars because we're going to have less customers coming in, and that's going to impact this on a longer term. So when we're talking about pricing, I had somebody recently say, I really like my labor matrix. A labor matrix is lazy and arrogant. It's based on the time of a job. It says if it's this many hours, this is what you charge labor rate. The market may be saying, I'm not going to pay that. We need to price not from the inside out like we've done historically, dealers. We need to price from the outside in. That's how customers shop us. We need to do the same thing. We need to be shopping our competition. We need to find out what their labor rates are. We need to find out what they charge for those bread, butter, milk, eggs, those competitive jobs in the market. Oil changes, rotate, balance, alignments, brakes, be competitively priced, and get that repair business by be competitively priced. Well, my effective labor rate is going to go down. My labor rate is going to go down. It's plus business. We're putting dollars in the bank. Don't get hung up on percentages. Market-driven prices, okay? If we focus on all these things, and one last point is sublet. Look at talked to you about looking at all your expenses. Look at your sublet account. Who are we writing checks to? Who are we getting 10% markup on? Is there a way that we can bring that business in? I don't know if it's PD, paintless dent repair, whatever it may be. We're paying these people and getting 10% markup. I want to bring that business in, learn how to do it, do the business, and make 75% gross on labor, 45% gross on parts. That's what I want to do. So any way you can bring services in, we want to be an A to Z shop for all customers' needs. All right? We do those things, then we can start increasing our gross profit in fixed operations, which means we're going to increase our fixed coverage, which means when the next downturn comes, and it is coming, then you can be a survivor. All right, that's it.